Good morning, everybody. It's Tom Christie back in the carving shop. Welcome to the YouTube channel, and we're going to start a new series today doing a Bufflehead. I'm actually going to do a Bufflehead pair, and I thought that would be interesting to do the pair as a part of the video series. They're similar birds, but there are differences between the hen and drake, and we'll go through that as we go. This was actually a suggestion from a subscriber that asked if I could do a Bufflehead for a couple of reasons. It's a very popular bird. It's a beautiful diver. It's also a good place for a beginner to start because it's a little bit of a smaller bird. There's not a lot of complex geometry going on, and the paint scheme is a little simpler than, say, something with vermiculation or a lot of different feathers like a hen mallard or something. So we'll start with that. I've done my research, looked at a lot of photos online. I want to make these in kind of a resting position with lower heads. So I've got my patterns developed, and if you need to refresh yourself on how to create a pattern, I've got a specific video on how to do that, and you can refer to that. I won't go through it today, but I'm ready to cut out birds, so we'll get started on that process next. Hey, if you're valuing the content of this channel that I'm putting together, please hit the subscribe button. I think 60% of the people watch but don't subscribe, and it doesn't cost anything, but it does help me out, and it'll help me build this channel and continue to add content as we go. Plus, you get notification if you want to. You can select not to be notified as new content gets added, because I know sometimes people don't want their email feed junked up with YouTube video announcements from Tom Christie. So anyway, I appreciate it if you would subscribe, and let's get started on the Buffleheads. Getting ready to lay these out, and just wanted to make the point that Bufflehead's not a very big bird, and I get questions sometimes about how big is the body blank. So this is 3 1/4 inch deep by 11 inches by 5 inches wide. So that's enough wood for a drake Bufflehead, life size. So I'll get those laid out, both the hen and the drake, and then we'll do some bandsawing. Okay, just a quick refresher on laying out your patterns on the block. I'll do this quickly. Make sure your block is square, and you can use your square to make sure the edges are square. You need that because as you're bandsawing, you don't want the block at an angle. That's going to change the profile from side to side. So you put the side profile on the block, use your square to strike lines up to the top and across, and then use your top pattern lined up with those lines. Put a center line so you can keep that intact. Similar layout process on the head, only I just cut the block to the proper width, make sure everything is square, and then trace around the head. And I'm not going to worry about cutting a top profile. I do that normally with a coping saw because the heads are small enough to do that with. So I've got those traced, and now all my blocks are ready to bandsaw. Hey, just a quick reminder, leave yourself a little extra wood below your pattern, because oftentimes the Tupelo block is a little rough and it's going to need some cleanup after we get the bird carved, and so we want to leave a little extra material down there so we can take that off and still be at the proper height here to pattern. I always start with the side profile and cut that top part of the side profile first, and keep that top piece of Tupelo intact because it has the top-down pattern view on it. And we're going to want to tack that back on the block when we get ready to cut that top-down profile view. I'm going to speed the video up now, just so you're aware that I am speeding it up and not actually cutting this fast. Now I'm going to go back and pick up that area behind the neck. And I prefer to do that this way because there's some pretty severe angles there, and it's just easier to get that piece out going from both directions. Now I'll cut the front breast profile from the side. Now I'm going to go back and pick up where the primaries drop down there and get the top tail profile cut out. And just finish the side profile with that area under the tail. All right, now I've tacked that top piece back on with a couple of nails and made sure everything's lined up. Now I'm still at twice speed here, just so you're aware. Just carefully cut that top down profile. You get to these areas where you have to change direction. I normally give myself a little clearance by working the blade back and forth there, opening up some room to then go around the corner. Same process here. You can see I'm opening up that area because that tail juts out a little bit in that area, and you need to change direction of the blade. Now I'm just carefully cutting off the tail pieces to size. Now I'm going to remove that top piece, take the nails out, and then do a little bit of sketching, because we're going to want to take some material off the underside of the side pocket here on an angle. And we'll also be removing material on an angle up here on the back. This is normal speed again. I've got the table set at 30 degrees. And I'm going to use that angle, keep the decoy flat on the table, and just carefully remove a little wood under the side pocket there. You can do this as much as you want. You may choose to leave yours flat down there. If it's a working decoy, you want as much surface area on the water as possible. But those are just two quick cuts to remove material. You can also grind that material off if you prefer. This is an angle cut. I'm gonna reposition the video here, camera, so that you can get a better view of this. I want to leave material back where the primaries are, but very carefully keep your hands out of the way, keep the decoy flat on the table, and take a couple of cuts here just to remove wood quickly. And you need to do this very carefully, because anybody who's familiar with a bandsaw knows that if you're not well supported, the blade can have a tendency to grab and try to pull wood down out of your hand and break a blade or get your hand close to the blade. So stay away from the blade, just carefully make these cuts. You may choose to use your grinder to remove all that material. Now we're moving on to the head, and I like to start at the tip of the bill, especially since this is a very short, small bill. We can't afford to make any mistakes here, so approach this cautiously. And I'm taking a couple of angle cuts just to open up room for my blade to turn around the corner here on the tip of the bill. And again, I don't want to gouge the end of the bill or remove too much material, so take this slowly and just cut the head profile. I'll speed this up for the rest of the remainder of this video. You can see I'm keeping my fingers on both sides away from the blade and just following that profile as closely as possible. If anything, leave a little extra wood. You don't want to cut too deep because you can't put wood back. I'm going to go from the opposite direction, form a little bit of the shape of the end of that bill, and then meet up with the other cut. There we go. One thing nice about working on a pair is you can kind of use the same equipment on both at the same time. It gives you some efficiencies. So right now I'm just using the pattern to mark my eye locations on both sides. And I want to drill a through hole, a small through hole, just to give me an approximate location that'll be there later when we're ready to install the eyes. But I'll drill those through. Now I'm just getting my center lines marked out on each head, all the way around the head. I mentioned this in some of my previous videos, but I like to cut the bill profile out right out of the pattern, because these little pieces are great, but they tend to get lost over time. And this way your bill profile stays with the pattern the next time you want to use it. Since I've got my little piece here and I haven't lost it yet, I'll use it just for demo purposes. And I kind of gave myself a guideline to get it centered, and that helps as you're positioning the pattern. These are small bills, so not much to hang on to here. I'm using my certified Jack Cox pencil. Jack always kids me about using the rattiest pencils, and that I should be able to afford a sharpener. He knows I get a kick out of that. All right, I got the bill profiles for both birds underneath and on top. Now I just want to get a dimension from the tip of the bill, this is on the hen, to the front of the cheek here. Transfer that to the wood on both sides. There's not much bill to work with here, so these dimensions need to be accurate or we're going to lose the character of the bill. Okay, I've got my layout work done on the heads. Just a quick recap. We got the bill, we got this angle back from the proper width of the bill at the cheek, and then I've dropped a line here just to give myself a guideline as I'm coping. Got those underneath. This drake is going to be in a resting position, so his head is almost widest right at the bottom because his feathers are splayed out on both sides as he's tucked his head down. So I want to maintain that width down there. The hen is a little up, so there's a little bit of neck there. So I've got a circle identified on the bottom, so as I'm coping I don't lose that neck profile. Got these angles and these angles at the back. So now we use the coping saw and get those rough cut out. Okay, I like to use the coping saw because the teeth are very fine, and again, bandsaw blade has pretty coarse teeth, and we would run the risk of tearing the edge of the bill, and I don't want to lose any material on the edge of that bill. So I'm just looking underneath to make sure my coping saw is square and I'm not undercutting or overcutting underneath. I'm taking it down to the cheek, and then I'm gotta reposition this to get an angle on it. I'm going to cut this section off, go in to meet where the bill meets the cheek, go slow so I'm not gouging into the bill material. Now I'm going to go ahead and cut this material off. Such a small head, it's pretty quick work with a good sharp coping saw. Do the same thing over here. Following that pattern profile. If anything, I'm crowding the outside edge, so I leave a little more material there because we're going to want to sand and smooth things off. And I don't want the bill to end up too narrow. And this side guideline is, I'm going to reposition that again, is a guideline I'm shooting for as I cope through this angle. It just gives me a target to shoot for. And this is all rough work, so it doesn't have to be precise. Now I've got the head flipped around, I'm just taking off this back portion in a similar fashion. And I don't want this to come to a point. The back of the Bufflehead hen's head is kind of rounded, or at least that's the way I want it to be. There we go, and now I'll do the same on the drake's head. Okay, using my reference again, I got a dimension from the tip of the bill to the tip of the notch here on both the hen and the drake. Mark that location and then mark the V-notch position at the correct width. And now we can start to, I at least like to carve that notch to kind of lock in the geometry here between the crown and the bill. And then we can begin to define the width of the crown coming off of that notch. Okay, I'm going to use this small cylindrical ruby bit. You've seen me use this before to define the notch if you've seen previous videos. And I got my thumb strategically in the video there, but I'm basically, well, I'll give you a better view here in a second. Going around the edges of that notch and taking the material on either side down a bit, so we leave the notch up and raised on this particular decoy. And that does change from bird to bird. Like a canvasback, that notch is probably down in rather than raised up. But on a bufflehead, we want a little bit of a raised area there. So I'm using the side of that ruby bit also to remove some of the bandsaw lines and kind of sand things smooth while I'm in there working on the notch. So I'll speed this up. This is at 2x speed, and I'm just, again, using that bit to kind of sand things smooth and make sure there's good definition in that notch area the way we laid it out. I like to use a pencil once I've done the carving and kind of reestablish the notch and make sure things look symmetrical. And now we'll work on the crown. All right, now I know from my reference that the crown width is 1.5 inches on this drake, and 1.25 inches on this hin. And this is just another tip. I always put the crown dimensions on my head patterns. That way, if I come back to this at some future time, I don't have to look up everything again. It's right with the pattern, the width of the head, the width of the crown, and those are 2 key dimensions. So I've got those measured out up here, and then we need to tie that into the V-notch area. And then as it goes back, it's going to narrow once it gets past the eye location. And then on the side, that cheek kind of goes right through the eye. There's going to be a groove here in the eye location, and then we don't want to lose material in the widest part of the head, which is the cheek, and this area that's going to be pushing down on the body. So we're going to take material out of here now on both sides. Eventually the crown of the drake is almost triangular shape, so it's going to narrow more than this, but this is the dimension kind of at the eye, which is where I want to take off initially. The hen, not so much. Her head is still pretty round, but the drake kind of forms an angular, it gets pretty narrow at the crown up there. And we'll look at that later. Just a word on safety here. This hen's head in particular, but also the drake, is very small. There's not much to hold on to, and I'm not comfortable having my hand that close to the grinding equipment. You can snag yourself real quick. So I've made a little handle with a lag screw through the middle of it, and I'm going to use that to screw into the bottom of this head and use that as the tool holder as I'm working on this head. And I'll make sure that's nice and tight, but that way I can hold on to this and keep my hands away. All right, I've got that nice and tight so it's not going to want to tend to spin on me. And now I can hang on to that and carve the head, and I'll do the same thing here. Now I'm going to use the yellow saber-tooth burr. It's a 3/4 inch kind of round-nosed cylinder, and use that to carefully go in and start removing material. Notice I'm working to that cheek line, which kind of goes right through the eye, and taking material off above that point. This is normal speed, just to give you a feel for it. And now I'll go ahead and speed things up because we're working to remove material to meet that crown width dimension. I may skip through some of these sections pretty quickly because I don't want to put you to sleep. You can see I'm just working back and forth to get to that crown width dimension and then blending that into the bill as it gets close to the front there. So let's skip ahead a little bit. Once I get that narrowed to about the right width on the crown, then I'm using the same bit to round the cheek. Now I'm going to start working the opposite side. Same thing there. Once I have it hitting the crown width dimension, then I'm going to round the cheeks and make sure that's symmetrical on both sides. And once the crown is at the proper width dimension and the cheeks have been rounded, we're going to switch to a different bit here. I want to work on this lower area where the neck is and take wood off there a little bit, and I'm going to use this teardrop shape burr. And now I'm on the marathon grinder. It gives me more control, and rounding that off down below. Once I have wood hogged off, I like to go to this marathon grinder. The pencil shape grip is really good for control, and the Fordham is more for high horsepower hogging off wood. Now I'm just using this burr to begin to shape things up, remove tool marks, and just round things in general. I'll speed the video up here so we can kind of watch progress. I'm using that to get under that neck area as well and form that and round it and tie it into that planning that we did on the neck dimension. I like this teardrop shape bit for general shaping because it gives you a lot of different angles and really can get into places that just a regular cylinder can't touch. I'm going to go up to the bill and do a little bit of shaping of the bill now. You can begin to round off the edges up there and work on that transition from the crown to the bill and from the cheek to the bill. Cleaning up the edges from the rough cuts. Then we'll take a little break here and see what we've done so far. All right, we can stop for a minute, kind of take stock of where things are. You can see I've been working on this front profile to make sure the cheek angles are the same on both sides, so we have good symmetry. We've got the crown width established. Now I want to start beginning to define the bill and get that shaped up and sized right. And you can see on the pattern there's not much of a return, I'm just going to call it that, on a bill of the Bufflehead. So it just comes back into the face, a short position, kind of drops down and then angles back. Those angles are very critical. You know, if I come back too deep, make a big round circle here like a mallard bill, it's just not going to say Bufflehead. So this is part of where we need to pay attention to the details. So I've got that penciled in, and then I want to establish where this upper and lower mandible meets back here at the cheek from the tip of the bill. So I've got my dividers. You can see also it's up above the bottom of the throat here a ways. So I don't want to measure that dimension and put it right down here at the bottom. I want to raise it up a bit, give myself room to do this carving that we're going to do down here in the lower mandible. So that comes from that position and curls back to here. And then I'm going to want to remove this wood in here and create this cheek shape. I'll do that on both sides, then we'll go back to the grinding. Just another point to take a look at this from the front and make sure things look symmetrical. And another way to assure that from side to side is get a measurement from the top here down to that rictus area where the upper and lower mandible meet, and make sure that this area is up high enough and not too low to give you the shape you're looking for, and do that on both sides. Kind of give yourself a mark. That way we know the bill is going to be in the proper position, the proper shape. Now I'm going to use this little, I'm going to call it 1/8 inch diameter cylindrical ruby bit, and this bit has grit on the end of it, so it can be helpful in doing some grinding like I'm doing right there. At the end of the bit is actually doing the shaping, and then using the side to remove material in that junction of the upper and lower mandible area on both sides. And then using the bit to kind of shape things up after I establish where that line should be. Going to catch the other side, and we're trying to reduce material there so that the bill
stays at its width back into the face down in the lower mandible. So this dimension should remain constant as it goes back underneath. Let me speed this up. Now we're at 2 times. Once I've taken that material out, now I'm just using the bit to kind of shape things back up, remove any ridges, and make sure that I've got a nice smooth shape remaining. Now I'm going to switch bits, put in a little bullet shaped bit, and this is a ruby bit, and I'm just using that to remove material and blend it out into the face so that we don't have a hard step there that we just carved. I use this bit a lot just for general pre-sanding to smooth things up and shape things, and the bullet nose on it lets you get into places that a cylinder doesn't. Now I'm just repenciling on both sides, and having pencil lines there lets me look at symmetry again, checking my dimensions. Everything looks good. Now I'm going to use that bullet-shaped ruby bit to just begin to round that area of the notch as it goes into the bill so that we don't have hard lines there. And again, just using this to generally shape things up. And this doesn't take the place of final sanding, but it eliminates the need to do a lot of sanding just by using I think this is a medium grit ruby bit. You can do a lot of shaping with these bits. I'll just speed this up so you can see what I'm doing. Just continuing to clean things up, basically. All right, now that we have that shaped up, back to some layout work and just get a dimension with the dividers to the corner there again and mark that out on my decoy. Same both sides, make sure there's symmetry. Then I'm gonna look at my reference and pencil in the separation between the upper and lower mandible. Then I'm going to use my knife to score down that line very carefully. Again, if you press too hard right now, you're just going to rip through that wood. So just score lightly and multiple times and take it deeper as you go. And I've had more success that way than trying to go at it hard and fast. Then we're going to cut down in this direction. Flip it over. Hopefully you can see this in the video. I'm just scoring this underside so I can relieve the lower mandible and show some separation there between the two. Try to get a shadow on that so you can see it. So I'll do that on both sides. Now I'm going to use this little pyramid-shaped ruby bit to just go in and clean things up and do some blending where I've left any knife marks and blend those areas out into the face and clean up that lower mandible. It's a little rough from the knife work we did. You can see I'm blending that out into the cheek then. And what I'm doing here, we're shaping up to do a little bit more shaping on the lower mandible. First things first, got it cleaned up. Now I want to shift back to the knife let me pencil in what I'm going to do here. That lower mandible goes back into the face in that area. If you look at the pattern, there's a little bit of distance here, and we want to create that in the wood carving. So I'm going to use my knife, go back, and then go underneath. I'll flip this around for a better angle and take out that little piece of wood. Do that on both sides. This is a subtle thing. You may not choose to do this, but it just gives a little more character to that lower mandible area. Now I'm going to use that pyramid bit to smooth things out again. And that begins to form kind of the V shape under the bill in the chin area as well. Now I'm going to speed this up again, and you can see I'm just using that bit to shape things and blend. Now I'm using my pencil to just make it a little clearer what we've done there. Now I want to establish the width between the eyes, and one of the best resources for that, frankly, is Pat Godden's pattern books. And I don't get a commission from Pat for saying that. I've just used his books forever for these type of dimensions because Pat did a lot of work in an aviary with calipers and just established these dimensions that are so hard to find for most of us. So I use them on a regular basis. You can see I can't get to the eyes with my calipers, so I need to grind in a little bit of an eye channel on both sides until I get to the point where my calipers slide back to the eye position. In order to form those eye grooves, I'm going back to this bullet-shaped ruby bit and just following that line down to the bill and behind the eye and going in and creating a bit of a trench there, and then going back and blending things back out. And the bird uses that channel as it's looking down its bill during feeding, so that eye channel needs to line up in the right position with the bill to be accurate. It's not pointing up in the sky, it's following a line to the bill. I'll speed this up now. I'm just going back and forth, creating that channel, but we don't want it to be a hard line groove. It just needs to be a depression. I'm doing a quick check. Still need to take them a little deeper. So you can see I'm taking that right up to kind of the width of the bill and blending that into that area. Once we go a little deeper, I'll give it another check and see if we're where we need to be. That looks good. Now that we have the proper width established between the eyes, we can go ahead and round the crown. And I'm going to use that 3/4 inch round nosed cylinder to do that work. I'll speed this up and we could just watch this being shaped up. I think a lot of new carvers tend not to round the head enough and tend in general to leave kind of square corners on things. So I would just encourage you to round away, and it gives a much softer look rather than a kind of a Frankenstein look, especially as you look at the bird from head on. Also blending that into the back as it narrows at the back of the crown there. Now that we've roughed the crown in, I want to create some cheek structure here, and it gives the face a little more character. We don't want to create deep grooves here, but just enough to cast a subtle shadow. And I'm going to use the bullet-shaped ruby bit to first go in and cut a groove to get it to the proper depth, and then I'll go back in on either side of that groove and round things and soften and take material out until it's a nice soft shape. I'll speed this up and we can watch these as I cut them in. You don't have to do this, and I kind of go bird by bird to determine how much I want to put into this. But you can see that rear groove I'm taking right down kind of to the neckline. This bird is in a low head position, so there tends to be a little crease that gets created when a bird has its head down close to the neck there. And I just think it gives it more character, makes it more lifelike. Now I'm just using the bit to round things in general, but you can see that little shadow that it casts. Now I'm going to go to the sanding drum with 150 grit paper on it and just use that to do some rough rounding and sanding, removing grind marks and softening things up. I just find using the drum like this is a lot quicker to get the rough sanding done, and then you can finish things up with some hand sanding to get into places that are hard to get with the drum. Just finish up with a little roll of Swiss sandpaper, and this tends to smooth everything out, and this will get us ready for the detail that we need to work on as we continue to carve this bird. Okay, I think we'll call that a wrap on this session of carving a Bufflehead pair of decoys. And we've got the bodies bandsawed out, the heads bandsawed out and rough cut. And now we've got the hen's head rough shaped. Next time we'll work on the drake's head. Very similar process, so we won't take as much time on that one, but there are a few differences in the shapes that we want to pay attention to on the drake versus the hen. So until next time, this is Tom Christie signing out. See you then.